Don't dramatize. Pack your bags and learn to survive. That's what my daughter-in-law said to me. On the day we buried my only son, she didn't whisper it in grief. She said it like a business transaction. Cold. Final. And within hours, I was standing on the sidewalk, watching her toss the last box of my belongings into the trunk of the car Darren had bought me after my stroke. 3 years I'd lived in that house, not as a tenant, not as a guest, really, as a father, as someone Darren loved and looked after. After my stroke, I couldn't drive my pickup anymore, could barely hold a fork without shaking. Darren had insisted I move in with him and Sienna. He'd converted the guest room into a recovery space. Said it was the least he could do. Said I'd always have a place. Turns out, that place came with an expiration date, and it was carved into the marble slab we lowered into the ground that morning. Sienna didn't cry at the funeral. She wore her sunglasses the entire time, and by the time I got back to the house, the locks had been changed, and Clement, the family lawyer, was already waiting inside, papers in hand. 30 minutes. That's what I was given. 30 minutes to pack up 3 years of my life. No warning, no discussion, just cold legalese and cardboard boxes already sealed. And you know what? I didn't shout. I didn't beg. I didn't ask her why. Because deep down, I already knew. She'd waited for this moment. She'd seen me as a burden, not family, not a grieving father, just an obstacle standing between her and whatever came next. That night, I slept in the back seat of my car, parked in the far corner of a Walmart lot off East Evans. February wind howling through the cracked windows. No pillow, no blanket, just a bottle of blood pressure pills rolling under the seat, and a photo of Darren in his Navy uniform sliding out from one of the boxes. It would have been easy to let the grief take over, easy to sit there and rot. But as I stared up at the ceiling of that car, spine aching, breath fogging the glass, something shifted inside me. Not anger, not despair, clarity. If she wanted me erased, forgotten like some unwanted dog, she'd miscalculated. She had no idea who she'd just thrown out. I didn't sleep much that first night. The back seat of a Civic doesn't give much room for a 72-year-old body recovering from a stroke. My neck locked up around 3 a.m., and my left foot had gone completely numb by dawn. Cold seeped in through the floor, and every breath reminded me I didn't belong anywhere anymore. When the sun rose, I pulled into a McDonald's on Colfax, ordered the cheapest coffee they had, and washed my face in their tiny bathroom sink. The man in the mirror looked like a stranger. Funeral suit still wrinkled, skin gray and dry, eyes sunken. I barely recognized myself. The woman mopping the floor gave me that look, the one people reserve for the barely homeless. Not dangerous, not quite pitiful, just inconvenient. The social services office opened at 9. I waited there for 3 hours, sitting between a woman with a toddler and a man asleep with his shoes off. When they finally called my name, the woman behind the desk barely glanced up. 3-month wait list for senior housing. Emergency shelters that open at 5 p.m. and kick you out at 7 a.m. No lockers, no guarantees, no room for someone with a trunk full of winter clothes and stroke therapy gear. She asked if I had any family to stay with. I almost laughed. Darren had been it. My only son. My only investment in this world. And I meant that literally. 20 years ago, I gave him the last $15,000 in my retirement fund so he could lease his first office in Lodo. Said he'd pay me back. He never did, but I didn't want him to. That money wasn't a loan. It was belief. And he turned it into a tech firm, Kellig Solutions, that made him more successful than I ever dreamed. Now, it was all gone. Him. The house. Even the Sunday mornings we used to spend sitting on the porch with black coffee, talking about nothing. I kept thinking if he'd only lived long enough to see what she did after he died, he'd have been furious. But maybe he saw it coming. That thought wouldn't leave me alone. Sienna had moved fast. Too fast. The funeral wasn't even over before she called the lawyer. The boxes had already been packed. My name erased like I'd never lived there, like I'd never meant anything. And Clement the lawyer, he wouldn't meet my eyes that day. Just handed me paperwork. Said everything had been probated. Sienna inherited it all. House, business assets, everything. Everything. That didn't sound like Darren. He was careful, methodical. He'd shown me insurance documents before, talked about estate planning, always thinking 10 steps ahead. So why would he leave me with nothing? Back in the car, that second night, I flipped through what few things I still had. In my wallet, tucked behind an expired Costco card, was a business card I didn't recognize. Howard Brent, estate law. Not Clement. I stared at that name a long time. If Darren had worked with 2 lawyers, maybe there was something Sienna didn't know. And just like that, I felt something I hadn't felt since the stroke. A reason to fight. The third night was worse. I'd moved to another Walmart, this time in Aurora, hoping to avoid the same security guard. Parked between two trucks near the edge of the lot, the wind howled against the windows. The Civic's heater couldn't keep up, and I couldn't keep starting the engine without draining the battery. I rationed the heat. 15 minutes every hour. The rest of the time, I sat wrapped in an old jacket, hands tucked under my arms, listening to the wheeze of my own breath. My medicine blood thinners, post-stroke statins, was almost gone. Some of the bottles had rolled under the seat during the eviction. I hadn't even realized what I'd lost until I reached for them that night. And food, well, I had $6 and a crumpled McDonald's coupon. I bought one hamburger and made it last an hour. The humiliation was worse than the cold. At McDonald's the next morning, I sat in the far corner, away from the windows, trying to look like I belonged. A teenage employee kept glancing at me as she wiped tables. I didn't blame her. I looked rough. My hands were shaking when I drank my coffee, and my coat smelled like the back seat of a car in winter. Somewhere between the first and second refill, I remembered something I hadn't thought about in years. 2 Thanksgivings ago, Sienna had gotten the flu. Bad. Darren was on a work trip. She couldn't stand or eat on her own, so I took care of her. Cooked, managed her meds, even helped her shower once when she was too weak to stay upright. She cried after that, called me her hero. 2 years later, she tossed my life onto the pavement without blinking. That wasn't grief. That wasn't impulse. That was planning. That was strategy. By the 4th morning, I could barely move. My knees locked, my hands numb. The snow came in light but steady. I scraped it off the windshield with an old envelope. It was February 19th. I remember because I'd been counting. Day 4. Homeless. Alone. That day, I went to the Denver Public Library. They had heat, bathrooms, and public computers. It felt like heaven. I sat in the back, head down, trying not to look like a vagrant. But inside, I was alive again. I started searching, digging. I looked up Darren's company, Kellig Solutions. It still existed, big clients, nice website, sleek branding. His co-founder, Gregory Mason, was still listed on the About Us page. But here's what struck me. The company was privately held, owned 50-50 between Darren and Gregory. And yet, the probate paperwork said Sienna inherited everything, even Darren's share. Did Gregory know that? Would a company like that really hand over half their ownership to a grieving widow with no business experience? The deeper I looked, the more questions surfaced. And somewhere in the feu of grief and betrayal, something started to sharpen. Darren wouldn't have left me like this, not if he had a choice. Sienna may have gotten the house and the public-facing estate, but if Darren was as careful as I remembered, there was more. Something hidden, and I was going to find it. The library became my headquarters. It was warm, quiet, and no one asked questions. I claimed the same corner seat every morning and spent hours on the public computer. No Facebook, no games, just search after search, trying to piece together what Darren might have left behind. I kept thinking about that business card in my wallet. Howard Brent. Estate planning. Not Clement Stern. The cold mouthpiece Sienna had brought in. Why two lawyers? That name. It meant something. Darren had mentioned Howard before, years ago, back when he'd started drafting what-if documents. At the time, it didn't mean much to me. Just another adult thing I thought he could handle without me. But now, Howard might be the only person who knew the truth. By Friday, I'd made up my mind. I didn't have a phone plan, so I used the library's landline. When the receptionist answered, I introduced myself. This is Arthur Grant. I believe my son, Darren, was a client of Mr. Brent's. There was a pause. Then she said, "Please hold." 2 minutes passed. My fingers tapped against the desk. I half expected them to hang up or tell me to schedule something next month. But when she returned, her tone had shifted. "Mr. Brent would like to meet with you this afternoon. Are you available at 2? I should tell you," I said. "I can't pay any fees right now." "That won't be necessary, sir." That phrase alone told me everything. Something was waiting for me. I used the last $4 in my wallet for a bus ride across town. On the way, I stopped at a Goodwill and bought a navy blazer for $6.99. It didn't fit perfectly, but it covered the layers of wear I'd picked up from sleeping in a car all week. At the gas station down the block from Howard's office, I shaved in the bathroom, combed my hair with my fingers, and tried to look like someone worth taking seriously. His office was in an old brick building in Lodo. 3rd floor, no elevator. I climbed slowly, knees aching, but when I reached the top, I stood up straight. The receptionist greeted me like I mattered, not like a homeless man or a charity case. Howard came out exactly at 2. Silver hair, sharp eyes, a calm, quiet authority. He looked me up and down, then offered his hand. "Mr. Grant, I'm so sorry for your loss." We sat in a corner of his office, away from the formal desk, like 2 old friends. "Tell me everything," he said. So I did. I told him about the funeral, the eviction, the boxes, the cold nights in the car, Sienna's silence. The total erasure of my existence from a house I once called home. He listened without a single interruption, and when I finished, he stood, walked to a safe in the wall, and pulled out a sealed envelope. My client, he said carefully, was a very forward-thinking man. My heart stopped. Your son anticipated that certain complications might arise after his passing. He handed me the envelope. Darren's handwriting stared back at me. To Dad when justice is required. Howard sat back down. Kieran left very specific instructions. Mr. Grant. And just like that, I knew my son hadn't failed me. He'd prepared for this. The envelope felt heavier than it should have. Inside was a letter in Darren's handwriting, dated just 6 months before his death. Neat, precise, like the man he was. Dad, if you're reading this, it means my suspicions were right. I'm sorry I couldn't protect you in person, but I've spent the last 2 years building a way to do it from a distance. I had to stop reading for a second. Just the idea of him planning this, knowing it might come to this, made my throat tighten. I started noticing things with Sienna. Her questions, her interest in my estate, her emails. I couldn't prove anything in court, but I could prepare. I gave her everything she expected: the house, the business, the illusion of control. But I moved the real assets, $8 million, into protected accounts. She doesn't know they exist. She can't touch them. And they're only accessible through biometric verification. Yours. My hands were shaking. $8 million. I looked up at Howard, who was watching me carefully. He really did this. Howard nodded. Every step. Swiss accounts, Cayman Islands, legal trusts, passwords tied to your fingerprints and retinal scan. He even filmed a message for you. He pulled out a small device, tapped it on, and Darren appeared on the screen. Not in a suit, not at work. Just my son, sitting at his kitchen table, looking into the lens. Hey, Dad, he said softly, if you're watching this, then I didn't make it. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. I need you to know I never forgot what you gave up for me. That $15,000 you handed me without hesitation, that launched everything. I built this company because you believed in me. He leaned forward slightly, his voice tightening. I also know what she's capable of. I wish I didn't, but I do. I couldn't stop her from taking the house, but I made damn sure she wouldn't take you down with it. He looked away briefly, then back. I know this has been hell, Dad, but you're not alone. You never were. The screen went dark. For a long time, I just sat there, staring at the table, $8 million. Not just money, not just revenge. It was protection. It was love. It was his final act as a son. "Where do we start?" I asked. Howard smiled for the first time. "Tomorrow. We go to the bank." Before I left, he gave me one more card. An address. My mother, Marjorie, lives alone near Cherry Creek. She has a guest cottage. She'd love the company. You can stay there as long as you need. I didn't argue. I was too tired to be proud. That night, for the first time in over a week, I slept in a warm bed, with a door that locked, a kitchen, hot water, and the knowledge that Sienna hadn't won. She'd just started the fight. I didn't tell Marjorie much that first night, and she didn't push. She just showed me where the coffee was, where the clean towels were, and made sure I had slippers for the cold tile floors. Anyone with manners gets a second chance under my roof, she said simply. I didn't realize how much I needed to hear that. 3 days passed in quiet. I ate real food, showered, slept full nights for the first time in weeks. Howard and I started organizing documents, printing records, reviewing Darren's instructions. The weight in my chest began to lift, replaced by something I hadn't felt in a long time: focus. Then, on the 4th morning, gravel crunched in the driveway. I looked out the window and saw her, Sienna. Designer coat, expensive sunglasses, fury boiling beneath her calm exterior. She parked diagonally, blocking the drive like she owned it. I stepped out of the cottage slowly, wearing clean clothes and calm eyes. She froze for just a moment, not expecting to see me like this. Upright, collected, not broken. "Arthur," she said sharply, "we need to talk." "You're trespassing," I said, standing my ground. "This isn't your property." She marched closer. "You think you can play games, hide behind old money and dusty lawyers. I inherited everything." "Not quite everything." Her face twitched. "What does that mean?" Before I could answer, Marjorie came out from the main house, coffee mug in hand, her gray hair pinned up with precise elegance. "Young lady, you're disturbing my guest? Lower your voice or leave." Sienna turned, scoffing. "Your guest. He's a burden, a liar. You have no idea who he is." Marjorie didn't blink. "I know enough to treat him with basic human decency, something you clearly struggle with." Sienna ignored her. "What did he tell you? That I kicked him out? He was living off us. For free." No contribution. I stepped forward. And yet, Darren called me his anchor, his advisor, his father. "You think this changes anything?" she snapped. "I have lawyers. I have the will. We'll see what Darren had to say, beyond the public version. She paled, just slightly. You're bluffing, she hissed. Am I? The look in her eyes told me everything. Doubt, fear. She'd controlled the narrative since the day of the funeral. But now, she was facing a man with allies, documentation, and something more dangerous than rage-proof. She turned to leave, but not before throwing one last threat over her shoulder. This isn't over. No, I said quietly. It's just beginning. As her car sped away, gravel spraying behind her. Marjorie stood beside me and sipped her coffee. Charming woman, she muttered dryly. I actually smiled. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't reacting. I was leading. The meeting took place on a Thursday afternoon. Howard's office felt more like a courtroom that day. Polished wood, sharp lighting, everything perfectly in place. I wore a tailored suit, not from Goodwill this time, but from Brooks Brothers, paid in full with funds Sienna didn't know existed. She arrived 10 minutes late, dressed like she was headed to court, and in a way, she was. Leonard Cross came with her, all briefcase and bravado, flipping legal pads like they could shield him from what was coming. Howard began with formalities, calm, patient, professional. We're here to address final disclosures in the matter of Darren Grant's estate. He said. Leonard cut in quickly. Everything was already disclosed. My client inherited the home, the business, and all registered assets. That was confirmed and filed. Yes, Howard replied evenly. But we've recently uncovered assets your client was not aware of because they were never hers to claim. Sienna stiffened. I reached into the leather folder in front of me and slid it forward. Bank statements, ownership documents, trust agreements, all with my name, all separate from the estate she thought she controlled. She glanced at the first page and froze. What is this? She whispered. Offshore assets, Howard said. Created from personal funds that predated your marriage, grown legally, protected intentionally. Sienna's face drained of color. Leonard leaned forward. We'll need to verify this through probate. You won't. Howard interrupted. Tone firm, because they're not part of the probate estate. They were never marital property. These are Darren's personal assets, funneled through legal structures designed to activate only under specific biometric conditions. He nodded toward me, and those conditions were met by Mr. Grant, not your client. Sienna looked at me like she was seeing me for the first time, not as the old man she pushed out, but as someone who now had what she tried to take. Her voice cracked. How much? 8 million, I said simply. It landed like a thunderclap. She slumped back in her chair, quiet for the first time in months. Howard didn't stop there. Your client was also recorded multiple times discussing plans to remove Mr. Grant from his son's home, including consultations with attorneys about power of attorney, guardianship, and declaring him incompetent. Leonard looked stunned. You have recordings? I nodded. Emails, transcripts, financial moves made behind Darren's back. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about clarity, exposure, truth. This is fraud, she whispered, shaking her head. This wasn't supposed to happen. No, I said softly. You weren't supposed to get caught. She stormed out of the room. 5 minutes later, no threats, no smug exit, just silence. Leonard followed, pale and panicked. Howard leaned back in his chair. Well, he said, that went better than expected. A few weeks later, I bought a home. Not big, not flashy, a modest Victorian near Washington Park. The kind of place where you can plant things, build something new. It cost exactly what Darren's house had been worth. I didn't need the money. What I needed was peace. The final twist came outside the courthouse. I ran into Sienna. She looked nothing like the woman who'd kicked me out. Same face, different presence. Her suit was cheap. Her confidence had cracked. She walked up slowly, as if unsure I'd even speak to her. Arthur, she said, I know I messed up. I didn't answer. I've lost everything. She continued. I just need some help. Something to get me through until I looked her in the eyes. You told me to learn to survive, I said, so now I'm telling you the same. She swallowed hard. Figure it out, like everyone else does. She didn't respond, just turned and walked away, slower than she'd arrived. Later that evening, I visited Darren's grave for the first time since the funeral. I stood there a long while, just breathing. You did it, son. I said, you protected me, even when you couldn't stay. The wind moved through the trees like a whisper, not of sorrow, but of peace. If this story moved you, share it. Some people wait for justice. Others make sure it finds them. Drop a comment. Hit subscribe. And remember, being quiet doesn't mean being weak. Sometimes it means you're just saving your voice for the moment that truly matters.